Good afternoon and welcome to the Preservation Association of Lincoln Brown Bag Lecture Series. My name's Eileen Berggren and I'm the coordinator of these brown bags. The videotaping today is sponsored by the Preservation Association of Lincoln. If you're interested in these programs, you can join our membership. You can join by going to preservelincoln.org. Our speaker today is Jerry Berggren. Jerry has a Bachelor's of Architecture degree from Kansas State University in 1971. He founded the firm Jerry Berggren. It was called Berggren and Hall in 1977 with mentor and friend Woody Hall. Shortly after, Hall retired and Berggren was left to carry on the firm. The first project successfully captured by this young architect was the restoration of the Prost Granary building at the site of the historic Fort Robinson in western Nebraska. And this was the foundation of a career-long relationship with the Nebraska State Historical Society and its State Historic Preservation Office. In 1983, the Jobs Bill was the milestone which introduced the firm to its most significant building type, the historic county courthouse. A project to improve the thermal efficiency of the windows in the Johnson County Courthouse in Tecumseh also initiated Berggren's concern for energy conservation and an ongoing commitment to sustainable design. In the 1986 Exxon oil and stripper well overcharge settlement led to the Nebraska Energy Office request for proposals for energy efficiency, education, and demonstration. Jerry's proposal, Courthouse Trail, was the first and the largest to be approved and implemented. The Courthouse Trail experience solidified another career-long relationship with the Nebraska Association of County Officials. Jerry's talk today is on historic courthouses in Nebraska. Please join me in welcoming Jerry Berggren.
Thank you, Eileen. It's fun to be here talking about one of my favorite subjects amongst so many friends and colleagues. I want to start out by saying that the courthouses are being used today. Here's a picture of, I think, 2 years ago, the 4th of July celebration in Seward, Nebraska. Recently, Fillmore County has been the site for bus tours with their historic courthouse. We restored that it was completed in 2000. You'll notice in this slide, Millard Fillmore was actually in attendance for the tourist. There he is again. This fall, Jefferson County, another one of our clients, also celebrated their 125th anniversary of the founding or the building of their structure. But unfortunately, and I wanted to mention too that not only was the courthouse the center of attention, but during our construction projects, it was all cleaned up so that they could use the courtroom for their quilt display. Tours of the renovated courthouse were also part of that celebration. There are courthouses that are threatened. In this case, ADA pushed the Morrill County commissioners to authorize construction of an addition to the courthouse. The long, low building in the back is just my opinion, but it's not quite as sensitive as it could be for the historic courthouse there in the foreground. Worse than that, a few years ago, Thomas County tore down their historic courthouse and built this structure that you see in front of you there. The grandeur of a courthouse is important, and while they've got maybe a grand entrance, it starts to fall apart as you get further out. Again, this is my opinion, and I'm sure others have maybe different opinions. Recently, it was announced that Kearney was going to have a high-tech courthouse in their campus where they could get technological support. And the courthouse, I don't have a picture of it. It wasn't one of our projects. But the courthouse that was constructed is very reminiscent of the illustration that's there. Again, my concern on this particular courthouse is all of a sudden we've got the old courthouse downtown, now we've got another facility that's on the edge of town, and what's that do for the support of the community, because the local attorneys and probation officers and bondsmen, anybody that has anything to do with the courts, are going to want to migrate away from downtown. But what I wanted to point out also is that there's hope. I was invited this spring to speak at the Texas Historic Courthouse Conference, which they hold annually through their Texas Historic Commission. In preparation for that, I learned a lot of facts about Texas. Now, I don't really like to brag about Texas, but here we go. It was reported in Forum News, which you're seeing an illustration of that. There are more than 254 county-owned courthouses still standing that are at least 50 years old. About 90 were built prior to the turn of the 20th century. By the end of the century, most of these structures were significantly deteriorated due to inadequate maintenance, insensitive modifications, or weather-related damage. The situation was so dire that the National Trust for Historic Preservation included the Texas County Courthouses as a group on their 11 most endangered places list in 1998. Of course, Texas being who they are, that wasn't going to do. So the response was to create the Texas Historic Courthouse Preservation Program within the Texas Historic Commission. And they launched the largest grant program ever initiated by a state government. In Texas, the Historic Commission serves as the SHPO along with having some other duties. At the point in time, which was 2009 when this article came out, Texas had allocated $207 million in partial matching funds to 68 counties for restoration of their courthouses. 36 courthouses had been restored and were functional. Another 22 construction and planning projects were underway. As of today, the income generated through the Texas Historic Preservation Program exceeds $288 million. In my opinion, Texas can be used as a role model. There's other help available as well from the Nebraska Supreme Court. Again, I received a call last year about this time to be part of a committee to rewrite the facility planning guidelines and standards. This document was 20 years old, and they were assembling a committee to update the document. State law actually requires that all alterations of existing courthouses and or new courthouse facilities are to be reviewed by the Nebraska Supreme Court Administrative Office. In 1996, the 1996 edition, which is on the screen presently, was the updated version from the original document created in the late 1970s by a committee headed by Dr. Ernie Moore, then chair of the Department of Architecture at UNL, and Janice Walker, then the State Supreme Court's administrator. The original edition benefited greatly from Ernie's doctoral thesis, which he did at the University of Michigan, which was the study of all of the state courts in the state of Michigan. Our document included demonstrations of, or diagrams rather, of how to assemble the areas, much like we do bubble diagrams in ordinary architecture, but it's important to separate these types of people and what they're in the courthouse for. Ernie's doctoral thesis contained a lot of these little thumbnail sketches which migrated into our document. The Professor Nate Krug was on the committee in 1996 and again joined us this year for the updated version. He reported that very little had changed from the first to the second edition. The changes in the latest edition that we were working on are substantially the technological information that we didn't have a use for in the 1996 edition, and security. This is all post 9/11, of course, and security demands are significantly different. The latest edition has been submitted to the Supreme Court for review and comment. The final approval is expected later this year. There's other forms of help besides the State Supreme Court, and going to Texas to get some background information. Our own State Historical Society had championed the concept of LB 191, the State Historic Preservation Tax Credits. And I wish I could give credit to the individual who was smart enough to put in that municipalities and nonprofits could collect these credits and then sell them. The credits are worth 20% of the eligible qualifying construction, And currently, those credits are selling between 80 and 90 cents on the dollar. We are involved with the renovation of the courthouse in Jefferson County. As I mentioned earlier, our renovation will improve their compliance with fire codes, adding fire sprinklers. It'll improve security and improve lighting with LED lighting for better energy efficiency. When the project is over and the credits are sold, they're expecting to collect something in the neighborhood of $300,000. We are in the process of preparing documents to bid on a masonry restoration project and roof replacement for Sherman County. The original terracotta has suffered a lot of damage over the years with spalling facial features. That's the primary issue. We will, of course, look at the tuck pointing also, and the roof is a traditional flat roof that is reaching the end of its life. We're expecting that the project should net something in the neighborhood of $70,000 worth of tax credits. Fillmore County is interested in applying for the tax credits, and we are in the planning process to do more work at the county. As I mentioned, we were involved in the restoration in the late 90s, which was completed in 2000. But there were things that the money there wasn't enough to complete everything. As you notice, the stairway on your left is pretty well beautifully restored, but the detail of the stairway on the right, we never had the money to really refinish this pendant. And there are several other things that we're going to add to this. Plus, we've had 15 years of weather exposure, so it's time to get the paintbrush out. All of these things will qualify, and it's a matter of organizing them and preparing for bids. Again, the Nebraska Supreme Court, I want to mention them because they are a fundamental agency that we have to comply with. They don't have funding available, but they do have experts in technology and in ADA, and they're more than happy to work with our clients in the counties throughout the state to bring the projects into compliance with those codes and guidelines. Again, I want to go back to the forum article about Texas, because there are the opportunities to go for community development block grants. We collected a block grant for installing an elevator at the Valley County Courthouse several years ago. But I wanted to bring to light some of the things that were in this article about the economic development when you do restore a courthouse and keep it up with its current use. The 2009 article from Forum News reported to that date the Texas Historic Courthouse Preservation Program had created more than 7,750 jobs and nearly $17 million in local taxes. In B County, Texas, the former chair of the B County Historical Commission said that the courthouse restoration, quoting, was the catalyst that really helped redevelop downtown and the basis of a long-range plan for the revitalization of downtown area that resulted in a reinvestment of $9 million in a 2-year period. The Nebraska Association of County Officials is one of those organizations who exists to serve counties, and they've become a real advocate for courthouse preservation, not as much as we think the Historical Society in terms of doing things precisely detailed to historic restoration, but making sure the buildings function, making sure that the boards are aware of what they need to do and how to do it. Last year, we promoted a concept with the NACO board proposing that they work with the Northeast Community College to develop an annual workshop for those people responsible for the care and maintenance of the county's historic structures. The board unanimously agreed and approved the concept. We're working on a pilot program with Northeast Community College wherein there'll be a one-day workshop bringing custodians, facility managers, whoever is responsible for the building together to learn whatever they can about pressing issues. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Anyone that's attended a workshop realizes that meeting with your peers and finding the common problems that you have to deal with is a huge benefit. It helps you avoid reinventing the wheel if somebody else has already solved the problem. Plus, Northeast Community College has a wonderful program that once you're enrolled, you can tap into their internet for additional how-to YouTube-type videos so that you don't have to be on campus, but you have that service available. So it's a program we're trying to put legs under, and I'm hoping that throughout the winter we'll figure out a way to get this done. Part of the problem with this is that most of the counties have very few employees, usually one, maybe two custodians, because they don't have a lot of structures to take care of. And an uninformed custodian several years ago, in the case of Hamilton County, in fact, Hamilton County was one of the courthouse trail participants that got a new boiler. The custodian thought it would save a lot of money if they turned the gas down to a cooler temperature, which within 2 years burned out the boiler's tubes and cost the county about $16,000 to get them replaced. It was a well-meaning mistake, but it's mistakes like that are problems that we need to address. The other situation is because there are so few people on a custodial staff. In the case of Valley County, they went several years without anyone, and the board ended up taking turns cleaning the county. Currently, Fillmore County has, since 2000, has gone through 4 different custodians and are without a custodian at this time. What I'm getting at, it's a profession that is needed, and the community colleges are the place to learn the basis of this, and we're really excited to work with the community colleges and get this as something they can provide and promote. One of the other things that I wanted to get to is that the courthouses are pretty complicated. In the case of Gage County Courthouse, we have an IT center, we have a number of things that when the courthouse was built, it just didn't exist. We also have a fire marshal that is insisting on having 2 safe exits from the district courtroom, the area of assembly. Of course, they put that on the top floor, which makes it a little bit more difficult. What I'd like to point out, you see all the red exit arrows. If you look at the district courtroom, there are 2 ways out. The arrow that's pointing up points to the central staircase, but the arrow that slips out the upper part of the district courtroom follows through an exit corridor that we've created specifically for the fire marshal. However, it turns out that this is an excellent path for a secure corridor for the county sheriff to bring detainees into the district courtroom, something that is also very important. Security is complicated for these facilities. As I mentioned, it worked. The Supreme Court recommends that we try and get all the courts on one floor, and we did that in the case of Gage County. You can see both the district court and the county court on the same floor. It keeps security. We can do 1 checkpoint at the central elevator. It's very nice. We tried to do that for our project in Saline County, and we ended up with a footprint that was a 60-foot wide addition. It just simply was not something that was practical. We had to rethink that, and we actually ended up with something about 2/3 of that size by leaving the county court on the ground floor and creating the red area is a secure area, and a little later on you'll see how that secure area flows through the rest of the building. Security is a problem because it wasn't that many years ago the U.S. Marshal Service would be happy to come out and give your courthouse a review and let you know where security could be improved. They no longer offer that service, so people are a little bit left out in the cold, and we're having to work on it from experience and from other sources. Security is also expensive. In the case of Saline County, it's going to cost them, when it's implemented, at least 3 more deputy sheriffs to monitor and control the access to the facility. This is what will be the controlled front entrance to the building. We've added a secure room where the monitors will be for some 20 to 30 cameras we have sprinkled throughout the building. It will also be backed up at the law enforcement center, so it's a redundant system. And you can see the layout of the scanner, the walk-through scanner, and the table for searching and depositing your metal objects as you go through. It really takes 3 people to manage this on an average day, and probably more on a busy court day. Good thing for Saline County, crime is down there. So, what's happened with our counties and what we've discovered and what Texas has discovered is that master planning is really the key. We start with several considerations. The Texas Historic Commission, with their grant money, a lot of that money goes into master planning. All of the blue areas that you see, those counties that are filled in blue, are master plans that have been approved. There are 54 counties. Again, this dates back to 2009, and I'm sure there's more at this point. And probably some of those counties that have master plans are implementing their projects. And the ones in orange, there are another 11 that have submitted a plan, was not approved, and it's back for reevaluation. But these master plans are incredibly important. The case of Gage County, we did a master plan. We were hired to do a master plan, which is a little unusual. And we came up with, I believe it was a list of 10 items that amounted to over $10 million worth of work. Through careful planning, we were able to, and some financial planning that we weren't involved with, we were able to do almost 60% of the work with about 40% of that budget, or that estimate, I should say. It was fun to look back at what they had for a courtroom and what they've got for a courtroom now. Judge Korsland discovered the ceiling you see on the left and was the instigator of getting started to restore the district courtroom. What you see on the right is what we had finished with. And one of my favorite views of the former courtroom, I won't call it historic, with its 1960 theater seats, and what we have now. Saline County started out wanting to put an elevator inside their building. This was important. It was ADA. They had no access to the upper floors except for a chairlift that seemed to break about every time they really needed it. The first challenge was to put it inside the building, and I wanted to give you a view of the materials that we were working with. We had marble walls pretty much throughout the circulation system, the corridors, and the district courtroom was paneled in walnut that was absolutely gorgeous. It had been maintained terrifically. What we found, because the sandy soil there caused them to have such enormously wide footings, the only place that there was room to put an elevator was in the far corner of this courtroom where the door is, which that immediately was canceled. And so about 6 years later, we were hired again to look at putting an elevator addition on, which also helped to give them a second exit. This is a small addition. It was about 25 or 30 foot wide along the north edge of the building. Very simple, very straightforward. The elevator and the stair were the main purposes. We did have some offices that gained area, and it seemed like a good idea, but fortunately, we still haven't done the master plan yet. Fortunately, they started having plumbing problems. Now, they had galvanized piping that was 70 years old, and we had just finished replacing the galvanized pipes in Valley County for $250,000, and we did such a good job you can't tell where we spent the money. So we reported this to Saline County, which had the same fixture count, built about the same time. So they realized that all of a sudden they're starting to get into a major event, a planning event. And at that point, they hired us to go ahead and do a master plan for the entire building, including space analysis to what they're going to need on down the road. In that analysis, we talked about security, and we convinced them that it was a good idea to put a basement in where we could bring in a sally port underground. The red area in these next several slides is the secure pathway for the project. The main floor with the secure area sandwiched between the county courtroom and the county offices. The elevator is a side-by-side door that allows for the public use. It's controlled by the sheriff. The sheriff's department for when detainees are being taken to court. The elevator, there's no secure stop on the main floor administrative offices. And on the upper floor, we took the original corridor and made that the secure access to the district courtroom. There have been some alterations since these drawings are done, but the project is well underway, and we had a topping out ceremony last month, which was an excuse to have a party. But all of that was put together in a proposal that the county decided to finance on their own without taking it to a bond issue, but they did have a number of public meetings to make sure that the public was supportive of the idea. We've also, as I mentioned, did a master plan for Jefferson County, Fairbury, Nebraska. That started back in the 80s as a stone restoration project. We literally hand mapped the entire building, documenting which stones were failing and which joints needed to be done. The concept was to get a good mason on and have the project done incrementally in increments of $50,000 to $100,000 each year using the inheritance tax. Of course, that got interrupted with ADA, and that got interrupted with taking the tower as a separate project, which was over $500,000. But then the whole thing got to looking at security and fire protection, exiting, all those things that courthouses have to deal with. And the project we're dealing with now, as I mentioned, it'll be about $1.6 million. And it will improve the security. We've added in temporary, or I shouldn't say temporary, but removable screen walls right there in the center of the corridor so that the sheriff can control access of the public using the elevator. When he uses the elevator, he seals it off from the public. We've had to take part of the courtroom out, thanks to the fire marshal, and created it's a low wall, so you still have the volume, but the exits had to be 50 foot apart for a space of assembly, and the other alternative was to build an addition on the corner of the building, which nobody wanted, so this was the compromise. We've also had to add several fire doors, and in the process we've rearranged so that, again, in this case, all of the court facilities, offices and courtrooms will be on the main floor, the county and the district court sharing the one courtroom. So that started in the 80s. Jefferson County, I shouldn't say it, but they're one of my favorite clients because they just keep coming back. They're not a lot of big projects, but they're consistent and they're good projects and they're restoration oriented. We've done the master planning is something that I'm totally involved with. We've done a lot of master planning with our various counties. Jefferson, obviously, and Fillmore kind of backed into it. Gage started with a master plan. We've recently been retained by Hall County to do a master plan since they have acquired the old federal post office and courthouse. They're probably the only county in the world, at least in Nebraska, that has excess space. Everybody else has run out of space, so they want to use what they have very efficiently. And there will be some buildings that they probably shouldn't be in that we can get them out of and really create more of a campus setting than what they have. The other counties that we've been involved with, Butte, we were hired to do a master plan out there, and I gave them a list of 10 priorities. We've been retained by Fillmore County to do a long-range maintenance plan because they can see from the photographs that I shared with you that maintenance is an issue. It doesn't go away. Mother Nature works 24/7 and 365 days a year. So their long-range maintenance plan, it's a little embarrassing. We were hired 2 years ago and the plan's not done yet, but every time we come up with an idea, well, let's do that. We've done new historic doors for the entrance to the building. The tax credits are there, and we're working now to define a tax credit project. We've got a serious situation with the former custodian. He's laid in a stockpile of chemicals that should last the building about 300 years. Plus, they're so intense that they're yellowing the tile and causing people to have headaches. So, we're either going to have to get rid of them or design a better facility to maintain those chemicals if they do want to keep them. Kimball County, we've done a master plan for them, and it has to prioritize basically space needs and their solutions. That may get going. It probably won't fit into the tax credit window, but all of this has been a great deal of fun for me, and it's been an exciting career. In conclusion, I want to thank Eileen for inviting me to here today to be giving me an opportunity to talk about Nebraska's courthouses. Obviously, it's a real passion of mine, and I've sometimes been asked, how this all got started. How did I end up with a career in old buildings to begin with, and then courthouses specifically? Well, it probably was a good thing when we submitted the restoration of the Fillmore County Courthouse for a National Trust Award. It won in 2002. That was a real help in our career, moving us forward. Of course, the energy project, Courthouse Trail, was a major influence in getting us introduced to a lot of counties. We proposed to do work on 10 county courthouses, and thank God somebody smarter than me told me that's a good idea, but you're only going to do 5. It was a whole lot more manageable. And it spanned 4 years by the time we did the energy analysis before, conducted the construction, and then waited a year and did an energy analysis afterwards. It was pretty amazing. Some of the things we learned were even more amazing. For instance, at Antelope County, our project was to install triple glazed windows with storm windows to boot. We really had the ultimate in window efficiency, and charting the result of this energy savings that we were expecting it wasn't there. It was deeply concerning. Well, we didn't have any more money to do any more studies, but fortunately, about 3 or 4 years later, we were able to come back and do a study. The problem wasn't the windows; it was the custodian. And I asked him one day how he liked the windows. He said, "Oh, they're wonderful." In the old days, with the old windows, I'd get here 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning on a winter day, and I'd crank that boiler up to its maximum capacity, and it might be comfortable by the time people went home. Now we're opening the windows at 2 o'clock to let the excess heat out. So not only do we have to restore the buildings, we have to teach those custodians and the people that use our buildings how to manage them, because it's a new system. It's a different system. Theoretically, it's a better system. So the Courthouse Trail was very instrumental. The Jobs Bill in 1983 led me to the work at the Johnson County Courthouse. Again, it was an energy project to improve the original windows by double glazing them. That was a long time ago, and I think back on my career. I graduated from high school the year that the preservation standards, the Secretary of Interior standards, was adopted. So there is some opportunity for growth and knowledge. And in 1983, the hot tip was to take the original sash, mill them out so that they would hold thermal paint, and hold the thermal paint in with stops. And we got smart enough to hold the upper sash in place with stops, and so we could use both sash weights on the lower sash. They replaced our window projects about 5 years later because nobody could open them. They were too heavy, and it sounded like a good idea at the time. It was the Park Service's idea, and we followed through with it. But it was a learning process, and I think we've learned a lot in the 20, 30 years, or 60 years since the preservation standards have been written. So that was a real eye opener, and I really enjoyed working on that courthouse. And actually, it was one of the commissioners there that said, "There's never any money for courthouses," which stuck with me and helped me think about and come up with the concept to do Courthouse Trail a few years later. But I have to credit this bill. This is the Hamilton County Courthouse. This was probably taken about within a year or two of its construction in 1895. Growing up in the shadow of this building, I'm not sure I could have done anything else. It's big, and it's the only building I know of that got bigger with age. As we become adults and you go into places that you've grown up as kids, they always seem to shrink. But our first assignment out there were no original drawings, and we had to measure the building, and it was all done by hand. And the building just seemed to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I've been all over that building. I've been to the highest point. I actually stood when we redid the shingles on the roof. I stood above the finial on the top, and I told the contractor that there can be no mistakes in this building. It's my hometown. But we had a really good working relationship, and we had an excellent contractor, and we had a pretty good budget during construction, which helped an awful lot. So that's my story. It's the best I can do. If you have questions, I'm all set to answer them. Yes, Matt?
Jerry, early on in the presentation, you showed a slide of, I think it was the Sherman County Courthouse with some terracotta conditions and spalling. How do you go about addressing that type of a condition?
The question is, how do we go about addressing spalling of terracotta? The basic answer, I asked that same question probably 25 years ago from a terracotta expert at a workshop in Chicago. And I kept asking the question until I got the answer that I really wasn't expecting. her answer was, you just paint it. Well, the reality is that's kind of what you do, except you don't use paint. There are mortars that have been developed. Edison is one of them that has, it depends on what the spalls are. If they're deep, you have to go with several coatings. It is artistry. You need a craftsman. We've got a few. We know who they are. And I'm willing to work with young people if they're willing to learn. I've worked with a lot of young contractors, and they're actually as much fun or more fun because they're so, when they're inquisitive, that's what makes it fun. But it's a process. You build it up. We use Edison. We've used Cathedral Stone. There's 2 or 3 different markets, but and most of those companies won't sell the product until the purchaser has taken the training to actually do that. But yeah, we've finished the terracotta restoration of the parapets on the courthouse in Valley County. And I didn't use that slide, but we've got one on our website of before and after of some of the terracotta repairs, some of the worst terracotta repairs that we've done. Yeah, Tom?
It's glazed terracotta.
Yes, yeah. I'm interested, we're looking at some terracotta. We don't have the job, but I was looking at the terracotta on the Golds building, which is stippled. And I'm sort of glad I don't have that assignment, but on the other hand, it would be a real challenge to find the craftsman that could reproduce that stippling with this process. Also, at Sherman County, we are going to have some pieces remanufactured. We're not sure who's going to do that just yet, but there's some dentals in the cornice that aren't there anymore, so there'll be new pieces there. Other questions? Yeah, Matt.
You talked a little bit about insulated glass, IG
Mm-hmm.
units.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had, and you've been doing this long enough, have you done some of those where that installation of insulated glass has sort of run its life cycle and those units are starting to fail now? Or is that just something that has to be periodically replaced, or have you found that to be a great solution as far as energy goes? Or?
The question is, have I experienced the eventual failure of insulated glass, basically? We all have in our skywalk. Walking over here today, there's some areas there. It can be a problem. It is less of a problem as the glass pieces get smaller. It has a life expectancy. I'm a huge fan of storm windows. Vented properly, you can clean both sides. The insulated glass, we use it a lot. I mean, we sort of have to meet the energy code, but it's just, storm windows are pretty darn reliable. The interesting thing about storm windows that we put on Antelope County, because of their size, these are pretty monumental windows. We actually hung the storm windows on a piano hinge so they could open like a door for cleaning. It's interesting as you look at old buildings, any building actually, the architect really needs to think about how the building is maintained. Can you get to that spot to replace that light bulb? Can you get to that fan coil unit to clean the lint off the fin tube? It's a challenge. And insulating glass, you're right, it has a life expectancy, and so that you need to plan for that. And that's part of the long-range maintenance plan I'm doing for Fillmore County. Yeah, Bob.
Jerry, I noticed a number of these courthouses, particularly the one you have on the screen, appear to have slate roofs.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had much success with the expense of a slate roof, being able to put any of them back in place?
We have put back the question was, have we had any success in installing slate where it had been originally on these buildings? We have done 3 slate roofs on courthouses, Hamilton County, Cass County, and Gage County. We've also done some slate work on one of the sites, Willa Cather sites in Red Cloud. Slate's very interesting. I tried to promote slate on Jefferson County. I promoted it for years and years. They're one of my favorite clients. And I finally was able to listen to what they were telling me. They couldn't remember whether they collected the insurance on the hailstorm in 64, 68, 72. I mean, they were getting hailstorms about every 4 years. They're just in that path. In that location, we actually went to a product that is made from recycled rubber, and they're happy. It looks good. But if I have the chance, I love to use original slate. We had an interesting situation at Hamilton County. It was designed, our design included the metal covers at the hips. The contractor offered a $9,000 credit to the county if he could cover the hips with shingles rather than doing the fancy metal work. That lasted for maybe at least 10 years. But at that altitude, which is over 140 feet in the air, and having had a couple of tornadoes in the vicinity, and who knows what else, the slate had been installed with nails as opposed to screws. And the wind working that slate, they began to lose some of the corner hip shingles on the central tower. They've since gone back, taken all of the hips off the central tower and reinstalled them with screws. And we did all the math calculations. It should have held up according to code, didn't. The screws definitely have a lot more holding power, and they're happy with their roof. Cass County, it was another black slate roof. The first slate roof that I did, well, years ago I did some slate roofs out at Fort Robinson, but for the counties, and being my hometown, I absolutely wanted the best installers, so I figured out what slate needed to be purchased. And I called the supplier and I said, who buys the most slate? And he gave me a list of the three most contractors that buy the most slate. They were the ones that were invited to bid on the project. We ended up with an outfit out of South Bend, Indiana. In fact, all three of the invited bidders were from out of state. But if you have access to the Slate Bible, and I think a guy by the name of Jenkins or Jansen wrote it, our installer was actually pictured in that book doing a church in, I think, Louisiana. Yes, Bob?
I was going to say, do you run into any extant concealed gutters, and if so, do you attempt to keep them, or do you convert them to exterior condition?
The question is, do we find any concealed gutters? Is that correct? Many. Oh, I got gutter stories. I could go till Tuesday. My hometown, thank you very much, had an interior gutter system because the drainage around the dormers between the corner towers didn't work very well. It was too tight. It held snow. It'd back up, and then it would work its way under the shingles and work its way into the valleys. There was literally an interior gutter system to collect the leaks that went outside. That's a little unusual. I've only found that in my hometown. But we do find a lot of built-in gutters. We were working on Nuckolls County. They, without an architect, hired a roofer to reshingle the roof, and the roofer did exactly what he was hired to do and did nothing with the gutters. Of course, the gutters were the primary source of the leaks. We went down there and figured out a way to remove about 5 courses of shingles and rebuild. They were actually built-in gutters on the eave. What we like to do is line them with EPDM. In 1964, the carriage house at the Ferguson Mansion was restored. This is before my time, by Clark Anderson Partners, and the details were very specific. And they had original copper gutters. I shouldn't say original. They required copper gutters to be installed as they had been originally. The state of Nebraska 309 has a sort of a ground rule that thou shalt not have built-in gutters. We've covered them up and hung some gutters out there, but it's my hope that somebody will convince 309 that it really needs to be built in as they were historically. But we find them quite frequently, and if they're copper, sometimes we can fix them. If they're totally shot, we try and go back to copper. If they're pretty good copper or galvanized and can support the EPDM, then that's what we like to do. So I don't want to give away all my trade secrets. So, no, it's been a really fun career. It's courthouses are fun. It's almost intimidated when I went to Texas in June, because reading about and learning about what they do and how they do it, it's like, really, you want to learn from me? I think I should be down here taking notes from you. But we're all in this together. The courthouses, I've had numerous clients say, well, let's just move out and build something flat on the ground. And, well, what are you going to do with the old one? Well, we're too afraid to knock it down. Well, then it's still got the same problems. And now you don't even have a use for it. So I think a lot of commissioners and supervisors ask the question so the public knows the question's been asked. I think I have to give a lot of credit to most of the commissioners and supervisors. They're pretty smart people, but they want the most for their money, and that's fair. Yeah, Bob.
One more. What do you find to be the most effective, or perhaps what have you used most often to handle the elevation change between grade and typically the first level of the courthouse?
The question was, what do I find most effective to get basically an entrance that complies with ADA? Well, a long time ago, I proposed, and so far, I've proposed it a lot of times, and so far nobody's taken me up on it. I had seen the movie Robin Hood with Kevin Costner, and I thought the catapult was a pretty good idea, but so far, no takers. It's hard. It's hard because when you study a historic building, if you look at the base of the building, you've got these massive stones. The Capitol is that way, as you well know. And the bottom basic stone is probably granite if it's a really expensive building. In the case of the Hamilton County Courthouse, it's Colorado sandstone. But underneath that is usually, very frequently, it's common brick, which has been damp-proofed if you're lucky. But that's where the moisture penetrates into the building if it doesn't have damp proofing. And it drives me crazy. Landscapers don't really see that. They just pile up the wood chips to what they appear to be sloping away, but it actually soaks into the foundation. So that's a problem that you have to be aware of when you start altering the access to these doorways. We were fortunate in Hamilton County. If you look, I'm going to step away from the mic here. If you see that line, some of those are at-grade gutters from the roof downspout. The particular one that I pointed to is actually a sidewalk to a grade-level entrance. William Gray was the architect for this building. I think he did it long before ADA was ever thought of. But this building actually has 2 at-grade entrances, and of course they took advantage of that. Saline County, where we're working right now, the grade at the back door is within just a few inches, and we were able to do a straight shot so that we're not interrupting the foundation. Yeah, with just a small slope to that. But there have been a lot of projects where they worry about the ADA individual, which is important. I don't want to diminish that, but they don't even consider what the impact is to the building, and it can be detrimental. It's just interesting to consider. Yes, Beth Ann.
Jerry, since Hamilton is also my courthouse where I was raised, what do you do in communities where maybe they aren't that large or they have outgrown and they need, in the case of Hamilton Town Square, they can't put on an addition? Do you then advocate that they build or lease space for IT or some other function?
The question is, what do you do when they outgrow the space, particularly when it's in a town square where it's awkward or impossible to add on to a side of the building? Every side is the front door of the courthouse, so to speak. I recommend hiring an architect. I'm sorry, but we have to think about these things. There's an interesting story about the Jefferson County Courthouse. They wanted a space for their maintenance person to have his equipment, his yard equipment, immediately available at the building. The way it was, he had to cross the street to a vacant store where he'd kept it, and I drug my feet on that one. And even more embarrassingly, they figured out that they could do it really cheaply with EFIS, the exterior applied styrofoam insulation stuff. You know, but eventually, even as an architect, a preservation architect, you have to come to grips with that it's their building, it's not yours. And so we designed it, and we modeled the EFIS to look like the same stones as the base of the building. And thank God a local contractor got it. It was his courthouse. And you have to look twice to know that it's EFIS. And we kept the profile real low, basically at the water table was the top of it. And it is pretty innocuous. Other cases, you know, we do our best. Saline County, our addition, we went to the north side. It was the least offensive, but it's centered in its block. You just have to work out the options. Holt County, it was centered in its block. We built on the back of it, but space is a problem, and it's rare that we promote taking a service out of the courthouse. It's just too important to the community to hold that business anchor. You know what I read from Forum News about the impact of $9 million worth of building within 2 years of restoration of the courthouse, and the courthouse is downtown. I mean, that's important information, and that's information that every commissioner and supervisor needs to hear, you know, to make their decisions. So, one last question. I've been given the high five, I think. Yes.
Has it been a challenge to incorporate our updated security needs and standards to all of the different types of buildings?
The question was, has it been a challenge to update for security? Very much so. I'm very much concerned with security. We try very hard. Particularly, I went through some of the attempts that we've done for Saline County they've got 3 entrances now, and it's the public building, and the public's going to scream when they finally go down to one entrance. But controlling the entrance is critical. Gage County, where we've got all the courts on the upper floor, we can control that at the upper floor. It's simpler. Every courthouse is different. Every courthouse is a challenge, and more courthouses are getting into the concept that we have to have cameras everywhere. And Beth Ann, you'll notice this the next time you're in Aurora, but they have clamped security cameras on our building. Now, personally, I think it'd be better if the security cameras were away from the building, focused at it. But I'm sure that I didn't have anything to do with the installation, but I'm guessing that the installer found that to be the shortest, easiest, least expensive route to mount the cameras. But we want to be involved with that. We want to learn from the installers because they've got more experience at it than we do, but we also want to protect our buildings to give them the best advantage. But it's a huge challenge, and it's only going to get worse. Again, I've mentioned the state Supreme Court. They have people that look into that and help. They're not the experts that the U.S. Marshal Service are, and it's unfortunate that service is not available to our counties anymore. So, well, I do thank you very much. Thank you, Eileen, especially for inviting me, and this has been a pleasure for me to talk about my favorite subject, the county courthouses. Thank you.